Welcome back to Dirty 20, everybody. We are back once again in the Home-brew Dungeon Master dungeon thing.
Cellar.
Cellar.
Where we
Thank
homebrew.
you. Where we brew our homes and do things.
Amazing. We don't have a script.
Yeah, no, clearly. I'm Dungeon Master Ed. I'm joined by Erik, the Homebrew Master, my personal go-to guru when it comes to anything rules related. And we've been going through a series discussing homebrew, how you can get into it, talking suggestions about things you can try out. In the last episode, we talked a little bit about grittiness, low magic, firearms as well. But today we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper because we're moving away from just adding some content, and now we're really looking at overhauling kind of whole sections of rules. We talked a little bit about it with regards to magic, you know, how it was done with Star Wars 5e, going towards a point system. But you know, Erik, what are some of the kind of areas of 5e that either you have felt you needed to overhaul, or just in general people talk about them as things that need changing?
I mean, it is a very interesting one, and as point out there, a lot of the stuff we talked about in the first few episodes, it's all about content. You add magic items, subclasses, etc., which is really common. Then we started the last episode with what if you change like a core mechanic of the game? What if you change how magic is actually used and casted in the game? And that is something that a lot of people have been looking at. And there's obviously three ways here. Either you change something that's already there, you add something new, or you completely get rid of one section of the rules to replace it with something completely different. Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a shout out here, really. We're talking about MCDM's Arcadia. Yeah. They are doing a sort of, I'm not sure if it's quite monthly, I think it's meant to be. D&D 5e magazine, and it's got some really interesting articles. I think they're doing modules, they're doing content, they're doing adventures, but what they also are doing
new classes and stuff like that.
Yes. But what they're also doing then is some new systems. So we're going to start with things you can use to add on top of 5e in terms of rule systems. The Dungeon Master Guide itself has got some optional rules.
Yeah, sure. We talked a bit about that.
Yeah. It's the madness and sanity kind of idea. The sort of Call of Cthulhu-esque kind of thing. But what they had in Arcadia, and I believe it's the second edition issue, and you can just buy these as individual issues if you want. It's got aerial combat.
Oh wow!
Okay. Yes, exactly. And it's primarily on flying mounts. So we're talking, you know, Pegasus and hippogriffs, etc. But I think you can also just be a flying wizard. And it's an entire rule system that the moment you jump on a mount and you go up in the air, what you can do on a turn and how the game works have changed. You're still using hit points, you're still using the action economy and your features of your class, but how you move and things have changed. There are extra dice involved to have your velocity and angle, because that's a big thing in aerial combat. It's starting to add those like dog fighting.
You've got me hyped for like Arcadia again.
There you go. No, it's really good. It's really good. You should go and check it out if so. It's Matt Colville's company, MCDM. Arcadia. If you search that, you'll find it. And they also then did something that's more common elsewhere. So yes, it's in Arcadia issue 1 this time, I think, but this is elsewhere as well. And that's the other option, that you take something that's already in the game and you start adding to it. And that's mounted combat.
Okay.
So it's in the book. There's even a subclass, Cavalier, based on mounted
it's so
combat,
short,
right?
though, man. Like the section on mounted combat is about like a paragraph long.
Yep.
I was so shocked.
And it's really hard, and there's a lot of contention here because a lot of people want to do the raw. They want to read what's there and run it like that. And you very quickly realize half-baked idea doesn't make sense.
No,
it's lacking rules.
It's kind of unworkable because you then feel like you're wasting. You know, you're not gaining anything from getting onto a mount and using it in combat and things like that, unless you are very specifically built to be doing that.
Yeah.
And then it feels strange when, you know, you go into a dungeon and you're like, well, my character who's built around riding this horse now has to walk through a dungeon without it, right? But
I think that's
certainly half-baked, certainly like, you know, needed more.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point there. And I think it's the bit where, so a lot of people come in these days into Dungeons and Dragons as their first role-playing game. And it has a specific history about dungeon delving. And you don't use a horse in a dungeon,
right?
For many reasons. In fact, I think a lot of the early rule sets even had rules for is this tunnel large enough to swing a greatsword, or are you going to hit the ceiling?
Yeah.
So, but 5e is not played like that. It's played in a much more open way.
Loosey-goosey.
And it even got lances. So I feel like it needs it. My sort of homebrew involves my version of mounted rules. And I think like it's a really important homebrew that I think a lot of people should look into. And if nothing else, Arcadia issue 1 has got a pretty good rule set because it's part of the core fantasy. If you want to be a knight, there's a lance you know, and the cavalier.
It does feel like a very important part of the genre that is not really represented in the game.
Exactly.
But I did want to ask you a little bit about sanity and madness, because I think this is a really fascinating element, and it does kind of support the whole high magic, low magic thing that we were discussing before. Have you ever considered, you know, using some kind of mechanic like that in your homebrew?
Yes, 100%. So in the versions, we'll get to this in a later episode, more deep dive.
Of course, we got to tease them. We got to tease them.
We do. So I have borrowed then from another big role-playing game, which is Call of Cthulhu, which obviously is a role-playing game that's set in Lovecraftian sort of early turn of the century onwards setting. With eldritch horrors, etc. So sanity is a big thing.
Yeah, massive.
They then operate as a second health pool, essentially. So you've got your health and you've got your sanity. Yeah. And I believe this is how the Dungeon Master's Guide do it as well. And it's the idea that certain things is going to drop your sanity. And when you get low on sanity, it's not because you're injured and bleeding and about to die. It's that you're losing grip on reality. And I have tied that together with my spell casting in my version, where first off, all psychic damage in the game is dealt to a person's sanity, which is their equivalent. And sanity is based on your intelligence rather than constitution, which again sort of starts messing with the balance of the game in terms of a homebrew, because intelligence is a dump stat. But
for most characters, you're absolutely right. It
exactly. Because if you don't cast spells with it, what do you need intelligence for?
Your Goliath barbarian is not going to have a high intelligence. You're not going to put it there. But this would make someone think twice about dumping it. Just straight up.
No, exactly. Because now all of a sudden, when he is subjected to occult warlock magic, you know, dissonant whispers, hungry of Hadar, etc., his sanity is going to drop.
And I think that's the biggest thing for me in terms of what this kind of mechanic adds to your game. I feel like often the occult element, the warlocky side of the game, doesn't really have much weight You know,
Yeah.
the idea of patrons and higher beings and stuff like that. It just, you know, I often say this again. We love 5e, but it is a little bit
Yes.
of a kind of Disneyfied, kind of very sanitized. And so the idea of introducing madness and things like that, really, particularly for like a horror theme game, or just to add a little bit more tension to your games, quite
Yeah.
honestly,
No,
can be
indeed.
a really, really good thing.
And
Like if I was running Curse of Strahd, I would consider including it as part of that
yeah,
campaign.
absolutely. Just to add that, and yeah, it maybe feels like more bookkeeping, but I promise you, once you start playing, having an extra little number to keep track of really doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, it hasn't
But
bothered me before. I mean, I know that in Warhammer Fantasy RPG as well, they also have a kind of madness, and Symbaroum, which we are kind of playing
Syndrome,
through
yeah.
currently, has the corruption element to it. So a lot of other games that are trying not to be quite as sanitized as 5e do have systems that you can take a look at. But you looked at Call of Cthulhu, right? That's
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, it's inspired by other things as well, just fiction and such as well. Like how, because it's back to what we talked about. We want the homebrew to be to have the rules represent a feeling and the atmosphere in the game. I want decision making to be made on things that makes you play into the world rather than because this is how we win the encounter.
And with a sense of
And
fear, and I like that.
dread, yeah.
That's what that always kind of really enhances whenever you play a game like that with that kind of mechanic. You then just have an increased fear because you know you're worried about losing your sanity and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. You start making these rolls like every turn to see if you're gonna randomly lash out and think that your friends are against you, or you get paranoid and you know you run away from enemies and you have to seek cover and so on and so forth. And you know, I know a lot of people are then gonna say, okay, maybe you shouldn't play Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe you should look at another system. This is a conversation you had with Gallifile as well. And to that, I simply say, I like Dungeons and Dragons. I like the core setting. I love the Forgotten Realms and Ed Greenwood's sort of world and such. I want to, however, make it mine. And I feel like the homebrew allows me to do that. And in essence, and I know this has been said before, if you roll a d20 and you add or remove a modifier, compare it to another number to determine an effect, that's D&D. That's a D&D rule system.
Right.
And I like it.
And it's amazing that you distilled it down to that. But yeah, very much so. That is kind of what it is. And a lot of other games try to find other ways to do things. You know, we played a little bit of Age of Rebellion and Age of the Empire, Fantasy Flight games,
which is the Genesis, like the fantasy version is called Genesis. Yeah, it's Fantasy Flight.
And there's the Fate system,
indeed.
you know, the Dungeon Core Classics, which borrows heavily from Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, you kind of have boiled it down. But I think that also homebrewing, and we've talked about this many times, but homebrewing is and has been from day one part of D&D. Like different groups having their own rule sets and their own ways of interpreting things. And I think that's it's almost like, you know, when you start homebrewing and as a group you agree on things, you're now kind of playing the perfect version of D&D for you and your group, you know. And there's I don't know. I think it's amazing. I really, really enjoy that.
I mean, it's why it becomes so intrinsic. We've sort of heard or implied it a few times, but it's the fact that if you jump into Curse of Strahd, you play it exactly how it says in the book. You are already in your version of it.
Right.
It's been played before. People have killed, befriended, seduced Strahd already hundreds, thousands of times. But now you're doing it.
Right.
With your character who's doing it for the first time. Right. And homebrewing is simply going, okay, I've got this really intimidating character, and he just like wants to pose and walk up to people. He's tall. Okay, roll charisma intimidation check. And it's like, oh no, I've gone with a fighter. Okay, let's start homebrewing.
Right.
Because in combat, I want to be able to scare people.
Yeah.
Let's come up with an action that lets you intimidate with your posture or your constitution, or, you know, you start tying things together, and, you know, that's how the homebrew then starts. You know?
Yeah, that's how it starts, and that's how it has been since, you know, the first versions that were typed up on Gary Gygax's like home typewriter. Like, you know, it's just part of the game. And I think that it can be scary. I was always, you know, reticent to move away from the rules once I kind of felt like I knew them. But I also think that inevitably you're going to feel like, okay, this seems wrong to me. For whatever reason, I can't get it to work in my brain. So let me adapt it, let me change it, let me make it become my kind of game, you know. And
yeah, no, indeed,
it's one of the reasons why it's so much fun.
Exactly. And I mean, that goes into, I'm not sure how much time we have left to
we're gonna be stopping soon. Sorry.
In which case, I'm just gonna slightly mention to sort of tease for a future, but just initiative is a great one.
Yes.
That fills that category where a lot of tables, a lot of DMs, a lot of players goes, every time you roll initiative, it's a little chaotic. People start calling out numbers, who's going to write it down, how are you going to list it? There's so many products out there, like flags and clips and magnet boards. And some people, you know, think like, oh, it's not up to the DM, or it's definitely the DM. How is he going to keep track of it? I made a card system. There's all sorts out there. It's clearly a problem, but maybe sometimes the answer is not solving that problem, but just getting rid of the cause. And start looking at maybe initiative should just be done in a completely different way that solves these problems.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, we have talked about kind of overhauling systems this time around. I'm definitely going to check out Arcadia for the flying mounted combat. That sounds amazing. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. What are some of the areas of D&D that you feel kind of need a bit of revamping? Soon we're going to start diving into Erik's actual homebrew that he's been working on over the past few months. And it's pretty crazy, guys. I mean, the character creation just in and of itself is so fun that I think you guys are gonna enjoy it when we do discuss it. But
yes, when that one line gets dropped, what I have done, like that one change, it's gonna make a lot of people go, wait, what?
Can you do that? It's homebrew,
yes,
baby.
You can. It's homebrew.
It's homebrew. Yes, I love it.
And Ed,
yes,
as always, keep slaying.
Well, first, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and as always, keep slaying. Bye-bye, guys.
I'm awful.
Yeah, you are. If you've enjoyed this content, then please smash that like button, subscribe, share this around online, and come and visit our website, www.lavictoriaproductions.com, to see all our past episodes, as well as our blog posts and all the stuff that we're currently working on at La Victoria Productions. Why not reach out to us and tell us what you think of our videos? You can reach us on Twitter. @MouthLaVictoria is our producer. We are also on Instagram. I am EnanoLVP, and our producer is Jazzy J. Cherot. We're also La Victoria Productions on Facebook and LinkedIn. Come on by and let us know what you think.